back again with me. Today I will make a video about PVR. I will continue the last video. Especially we are still reading about the Great Gatsby. The last video, we read it chapter 1. So right now we'll read chapter 2. The chapter 2 just have 10 pages, so I think it's more short than before. Yeah, let's enjoy that. And I just wanna making greetings as long 30 seconds. So today I'm cute and I'm look so energetic because the ride give me vibes like that, and my lips also, even it's not red. And I think my head be better after the last. I think one week already. 1 week feel dizzy too much. Even get sleep. Even I eat. Even I many drink water, but still, oh my god. I don't know what happened with myself, but I think today be better, and it's just like miracle for me in the morning. So yeah, that's about myself. Let's read it with me. Hatem chapter 2. About halfway between West Edge and New York, the motor road hastily joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile, so as to string away from the certain desolate area of lane. This is valley of essays a fantastic form where asses grow like weight into the ridges and hills and grows his garden, whereas asses take from of house and chimney and the rising smokes, and finally with the transcendent effort of man who move dimbly and already crumbly through the powdery air. Occasionally a line of grey cars crawls along an invisible track, gives out a ghastly crack and comes to rest, and immediately the ace-grey men shone up with the leaden spades and stir up the impenetrable loud, which screened their obscure operation from the sights. But above the grey lane and the spams of bleak dust, which drift endlessly over it, you perceive after a moment the eyes of Dr. T.G. Eckleberg. The eyes of Dr. T.G. Eckleberg are blue are gigantic. Their rises are on yard height. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which appease over non-existent nose. Evidently some wild witch of an Achilles set them there to fathom. This is practiced in the Burj of Queen, and then sank down himself into eternal blindness or forgot them and moved away. But his eye dimmed a little by many painless days under sun and rain. Broad on over the solemn dumpling ground, the valley of Asses is bounded on one side by a small foul river, and when the drawbridge is up to late barges through, the passenger on waiting trains can stare at the dismal skein for as long as half an hour. There is always a halt there of at least a minute, and it was because of this that I first met Tom Buchanan Misters. The fact that he had one was insisted upon wherever he was known. His acquaintances resented the fact that he turned up in the popular restaurant with her ham, leaving her at the table, sauntered about chatting with whomsoever he knew. Though I was curious to see her, I had no desire to meet her, but I did. I love that one. I went up to New York with the Tom and the train on the afternoon. I went up to the New York with Tom and the train one afternoon, and when we stopped by the Essex, he jumped to his feet and, taking hold of my elbow, literally forced me from the car. We're getting off, he insisted. I want to meet my girl. I think he think up a good deal at the luncheon, and his determination to have company border on feelings. The superfluous assumption was that on Sunday afternoon I nothing better to do. I followed him over a long whitewashed railroad fence, and we walked back 100 yards along the road under Dr. A clever persistent stare. The only building in the sight was a small block of yellow bricks sitting on the edges of the wasteland, a sort of compartment street ministering to it and contiguous to absolutely nothing. One of the three shops it contained was for rent and another was an older night restaurant approached by trail of Ace. The third was garage repair. George B. Wilson car bought and sold, and I followed Tom inside. The interior was unprosperous and bare. The only care visible was the dust-covered rag of fur which is crouched in the dim corner. It had occurred to me that its shadow of garage must be blind and that sumptuous and romantic apartment were concealed overhead. When the proprietor himself appeared in the door of an office, whipping his hand on pieces of waste, he was a blond, spiritless man, anemic and faintly handsome. When he saw us, a dim gleam of hope sprang into his light blue eyes. "Hello, Wilson, old man," said Tom, slapping him jovially on the shoulder. "How's the business?" "I can complain," answered Wilson unconventionally. "When are you going to sell me the car?" "Next week. I got my man working on it now. Works pretty slow, don't he?" "No, he doesn't," said Tom coldly. "And if you feel the way about it, maybe I better sell it somewhere else after all." "I don't mean that," explained Wilson quickly. "I just mean—" His voice faded off and Tom glanced impatiently around the garage. Then I heard footsteps on the stair, and in a moment the thickest figure of a woman broke out to light from the office. There she was in the middle threads and faintly shouted, but she carried her shapeless flesh sensuously as a some woman can, her face above a spotted dress of the dark blue crepe design contained no facet or gleam or beauty, but there was immediately perceptibly vitality about her as if the nerves of the body were continually smoldering. She smiled slowly and walking toward her husband, as he were a ghost, shook hands with the Tom, looking him flush in the eye. Then she wet her lips, and without turning around spoke to her husband in a soft, coarse voice. "Get some chair. Why don't you? Somebody can sit down." "Oh, sure," agreed Wilson hurriedly, and went toward the little office, mingling immediately with the comet color of the walls. A white ashen dust veiled his dark suit and his pale hair as enveloped in the dignity, except his wife, who moved close to Tom. "I want to see you," said Tom indignantly. "Get on the taxi train." "All right. I'll meet you by the newsstand and the lower level." She nodded and moved away from him just as George Wilson emerged with two chairs from his office door. We waited for her down the road and outside. It was a few days before the 4th of July, and a grey scribbling Italian child was setting torpedoes in the long railroad track. "Terrible place, isn't it?" said Tom, exchanging a frown with the doctor at Clever. "Awful! It does her good to get away. Doesn't her husband object, Wilson's? He thinks he goes to see her sister in the New York. He's so dumb. He doesn't know he'll lie. So Tom Buchanan and this girl and went up together to New York, or not quite together, for Mr. Wilson said the right discreetly is another car. Tom deferred that much to his sensibilities of chose is Ager, who might be on the train. She had changes her dress to a brown figure muslin, which is stretched tight over her leather right hips, and Tom helped her to fight from in the New York. At the newsstand, she bought a coffee, a tone kettle, title, and moving picture magazine. And in station drug store, some cold cream and small flakes of perfume. Upstairs, in the solemn echoing drive, she let for she let for taxable drive away before she selected a new one, lavender color with the gray upholstery, and this is we slide out from the mass of the station into the glowing sunshine. But immediately she turned sharply from the window and leaning forward, tapped on the front glass. I want to get one of those dogs, she said earnestly. I want to get one for an apartment. They're nice to have a dog. We begged up to a grey old man who bore an absurd resemblance to John the Rockefeller in basket swung from his neck, covered a dozen very recent puppies of an intermediate breed. What kind are they? Asked Mr. Wilson eagerly as they came to taxi window. All kind. What kind do you want, lady? I like to get one of those police dogs. I don't suppose you got that kind. The man peered doubtly into the basket, plunged into the hand and drew one too, wriggling by the back of the neck. That that's no police dog, said Tom. No, it's not exactly a police dog, said the man with disappointment in his voice. It's more of an irritable. He paced his hand over the brown was right on the brake. Look at the coat, some coat. That's a dog. Shall never bother you with the catching cold. I think it's a cute, said Mr. Wilson enthusiastically. How much is it, that dog? He looked at it admiringly. That dog will cost you $10. The irritable. Undoubtedly, there was an irritable concern in it somewhere. Though its feet were strongly white, changed his hands and settled down into Mrs. Wilson's lap, where she folded the feather-proof coat with rapture. Is a boy or a girl? She asked delicately. That dog? That dog's boy? It's a bitch, said Tom decisively. Here's your money. Go and buy 10 more dogs with it. We drove over to 50 Avenue, so warm and soft, almost pastoral, and the summer Sunday afternoon that I would have been surprised to see a great flock of white sheep turn the corner. Hold on, I said. I have to leave you here. No, you don't, interposed Tom quickly. My little be hard if you don't come up to apartment. Won't you, Muriel? Come on, see you. I'll telephone my sister Catherine. She is said to be very beautiful by people who ought to know. Well, I like to, but we went on cutting back again over the park toward the West 100 and 158th Street. The cab stopped at the one slice in the long white gate of apartment house, throwing a regal homecoming glance around the neighborhood. Mrs. Wilson gathered up her dog and her other purchase and went haughtily in. I'm going to have Mickey's come out, she announced as we rose in the elevator. And of course I got to call up my sister too. The apartment was on the top floor, a small living room, a small dining room, a small bedroom, and a bath. The living room was crowded to be door with the set of tapestry furniture entirely too large for it, so that to move about, so stumbled continually over skins of ladies swimming in the garden of her faces. The only picture was an over-enlarged photograph of friendly a band sitting a blurred look at distance. However, the tent resolved itself into bonnet, and the countenance of a stout old lady beamed down into the room. Several old copies of Tone Tale lay on the table together with a copy of Simon called Peter and some the small scandal magazine of Broadway. Mr. Wilson was the first concerned with the dog. A reluctant elevator boy went for a boxful of straw or some milk, to which he added on his own initiative a tin of hard top biscuit, one of decomposed apathetically in the saucer of milk all afternoon. Meanwhile, Tom brought out a bottle of whiskey from Logan bureau door. I have been drunk just twice in my life, and the second time was the afternoon, so everything that happened was a dim, hazy cast over it. Also, until after 8 o'clock, the apartment was full of cheerful sun. Sitting on the Tom's lap, Mrs. Wilson called up several people on the telephone. Then there were no cigarettes, and I went up to buy some at drugstore on the corner. When I came back, they had disappeared, so I sat down discreetly in the living room and read a chapter Simon called Peter. Either it was terrible sober on the whiskey distorted things, because it didn't make any sense to me, just as Tom and Miro. After the first drink, Mr. Wilson's, I called each other by our first name. Repeated company coming to arrive at the apartment door. The sister, Catherine, was a slender, portly girl of about 30, with a solid, sticky bob of red hair, and complexion powdered milky white. Her eyebrow had been plucked and then drawn on against at a more rakish angle, but the effort of nature toward the restoration of the old alignment gave a blur air to her face. When she moved about, there was incessant clicking as innumerable pottery breakers jingled up and down. Even her arm. She came in witches such as a proprietary haste and looked around so positively at the furniture and wondered if she lived here. But when I asked her, she laughed immoderately, repeated my question aloud, and told me she lived with the girl friends at the hotel. Mr. Mickey was a pale, feminine was from the flat below. He had just shaved, for there was a white spot and leather on his cheekbone, and he was most respectful in his greeting to everyone in the room. He informed me that was in the artistic game, and I gathered later that he was photographer and had made a dim enlargement of Mr. Wilson's mother, which is, however, like anthropologism on the wall. His wife was frail, languid, and handsome, and horrible. She told me with pride that her husband had photographed her 127 times since they had been married. Mrs. Wilson had changed her costume some time before, and was now attired in an elaborate afternoon dress of cream-colored chiffon, which gave out a continual rustle as she went about the room, with the influence that dressed her personality had also undergone a changes. The intense vitality that had been so remarkable to in the garage was converted into impressive hauteur. Her laughter, her gesture, her association became more friendly affected moment by moment as she expanded. The room grew smaller around her until she seems to be revolving on a noisy, cracking pivot through the smoky air. My dear, she told her sister in high mincing shout, most of these fellows will cheat you every time. All they think of is money. I had a woman up here last week to look at my feet, and when she gave me the bill you at the touch, she had my appreciation out. What was the name of the woman? Asked Mrs. Mackey. Mrs. Eberhard, she goes around looking people fit in their own homes. I like your dress, remarked Mrs. Mickey. I think it's adorable. Miss Wilson rejected the compliment by raising her eyebrow in disdain. It's just a crazy old thing. She said I just sleep, sometimes when I don't care what I look like. But it looks wonderful on you, if you know what I mean. Pursue, Mr. Mickey. If Chester could only get you in the pose, I think he could make something of it. Well, all looked in the silence at Mrs. Wilson, who removed a strand of hair from over her eyes and looked back at us with a brilliant smile. Mr. Mickey regarded her intensely with his head on one side and then moved his hand back and forth slowly in front of his face. I should change the light, he said after a moment. I like to bring out the modeling of the future and try to get hold of all big hair. I wouldn't think of changing the light, cried Mr. Mickey. I think it's her husband said. Shh. And we all looked at the subject again, where even Tom Buchanan yawned audibly and got to his feet. You, Mickey, have something to drink, he said. Get some more ice and mineral water midway before everybody goes to sleep. I told that the boy about the nice merely raises her eyebrow in despair at the stiffness of the lower order. These people, you have to keep after them all the time. She looked at me and laughed fondly, and she plunges over to dog, kissed it with the ecstasy, and swept into the kitchen, implying that a dozen sips awaited her order there. I done some nice things out on Long Island, asserted Miss Mickey, to look at him blankly. Two of them we have found downstairs. To what? Demanded Tom. To study. One of them I call Montauk Point, the coast, and the other I call Montauk Point, the sea. The sister Catherine sat down beside me on the couch. Do you live down on the Long Island too? She inquired. I live at the West End. Really? I was down there at a party about a month ago. At a man named Gatsby. Do you know him? I live next door to him. Well, they say he's a nephew or cousin or Kaiser Wilhelm. That's where all his money comes from. Really? She needed. I'm scared of him. I hate to have him get anything on time. This is absorbing information about my neighbor was interrupted by Mrs. Mickey pointing suddenly at Catherine. Sister, I think you do something with her, she broke out, but Mr. Mickey only nodded in the go away envious feeling and turned his attention to Tom. I like to more walk Long Island if I could get the inter and I'll ask that they should give me start ask merely, said Tom, breaking into the short shout of loud tears as Mrs. Wilson entered with the tray. She'll give you a letter of introduction. Won't you merely? To what? She asked startled. You give Miss Key a letter of introduction to your husband so he can do something study of him. His lips moved silently for a moment as he invaded George B. Wilson at the Gascoigne Palm or something like that. Catherine leaned close to me and whispered in my ear. Neither of them can stand the person they married to, can they? Can stand them? She looked at the mirror and then at the Tom. What I say is, why go on living with them if they can't stand them? If I was them, I get a divorce and get married to each other right away. Doesn't she like Wilson either? The answer to this was unexpected. It came from Myrtle, who had overheard the question and was feeling of scan. You see? Cried Catherine trembly. She lowered her voice again. It's really his wife that's keeping them apart. She is Catholic, and they don't believe in divorce. Daisy was not Catholic, and I was a little shocked at the elaborateness of the lie. When they do get married, continued Catherine, they are going west to live for a while until it blows over. It'd be more discreet to go to Europe. Oh, do you like Europe? She exclaimed surprisingly. I just got back from Monte Carlo. Really? Just last year, I went over three with other girl. Stay long? No, we just went to Monte Carlo and back. We went by way of Mercedes. We had over $1,200 when we started, but we got cheap out of it all in 2 days in the private room. We had awful time getting back. I can tell you, God, how I hate that town. The late afternoon sky bloomed in the window for the moment like the blue honey of the Mediterranean. Then the shrill voices of Mrs. Miss Key called me back into the room. I almost made a mistake to see declared vigorously. I almost married a little kid who been after me for years. I know. He was following me. Everybody keeps saying to me, Lucially, that man's way below you. But if I hadn't met Chester, he outgot me. Yes, yours. Yes, but listen, said Miss Ralph Wilson, nodding her head up and down. At least you didn't marry him. I know I didn't. Well, I married him, said Middle ambiguously, and that the difference between your case and mine. Why did you merely? Demanded Catherine. Nobody forced you to. Immediately consider. I married him because I thought he was a gentleman, she said finally. I thought he knew something about breeding, but he wasn't fit to lick my shoe. You were crazy about him for a while, said Catherine. Crazy about him? Cried Italy incredulously. Who said I was crazy about him? I never was any more crazy about him than I was that man dear. She pointed suddenly at me, and everyone looked at me accusingly. I tried to show by my experience that I had played no part in the past. The only crazy I was when I married him. I know right away I made a mistake. He borrowed somebody's bath suite to get married in and never even told me about it. And the man came after it. They when he was out. Oh, is that your suite? I said. This is the first I ever heard about it, but I gave to him. And then I lay down and cried to be the bed all afternoon. She really ought to get away from him, resumed Catherine to me. They've been living over the garage for 11 years. And now the sweetie she her had. The bottle of whiskey, a second one, was now in constant demand by all present excepting Catherine, who felt just as good as or nothing at all. Tom rang for the janitor and sent him for some celebrated sandwich, which were a complete super in themselves. I want to get out and walk shortward toward the park to the shop trolley. But it's time to try to go. I became entangled in somewhat Sweden argument which has pulled me back as we the ropes into my chair. That hike over the city, our line of yellow window must have contributed their share of human secrecy to be casual watcher in the darkening secret. Street. Um, and I was into looking up and wondering. I was written and without stimulators and haste and repelled by inexhaustible variety of life. Marialty pulled her chair close to mine, and suddenly her warm breath poured over me the story of her first meeting with Tom. It was the two little seats facing on each other that are always the last one left on the train. I was going up to the New York to see my sister and spend the night. He had on a dress suit and pigeon leather shoes, and I couldn't keep my eyes off him. But every time he looked at me, I hate to pretend to be looking at the advertisement over his head. When we came into the station, he was next to me, and his white shirt front presses against my arm, and so I told him I have to call a policeman. But he knew I lied. I was so excited that when I got into the taxi with him, I didn't hardly know I wasn't getting into my subway train. All I kept thinking about over and over was you can live forever, you can live forever. She turned Mrs. Key and the room rainfall of the artificial laughter. My dear, she cried, I'm going to give you this dress as soon as I'm through with it. I go to the cane to get another tomorrow. I'm going to make a list for things I got to get, a message and a wave and a color for that, and one of those coded little ashtrays where you touch a spearing and write with a black snake pole for Mother Grave that I last all summer. I got to the write down a list so I won't forget all the things I got to do. It's why 9 o'clock. Almost immediately afterward, I looked at my watch and found it was 10. Miss Key was asleep on chair, with his fists clenched in his lap, like a photograph of me of action, taking out of my handkerchief. I withered from his cheek, and the remains of the spot of dry leather that had worried me all the afternoon. The little dog was sitting on the table looking with a blind eye through the smoke, and from the time to time groaning faintly, and then lost each other, searched for each other, found each other a few feet away. Sometime toward midnight, Tom Bushon and Mrs. Wilson stood face to face, discussing in impatient voices. Whenever Mr. Wilson have any right to mention Daisy name, Daisy, 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 shouted Mrs. Wilson. I say it when I ever want to say Day. Making a short daft movement, Tom Buchanan broke her nose with his open hand. Then, where bloody towels sheep on the bathroom floor, and woman voices scolding and hiked over confusion along broken wail of the pain. Mr. Mickey awoke from his douche and started in a daze toward the door. When he had gone halfway, he turned around and started at the gate, his wife and Catherine scolding, consoling as they stumbled her in there among the crowded furniture with the article of aid and the spraying figure on the couch, bleeding faintly and trying to spread a coffee toned towel over the tapestry skin of Versailles. Then Mr. Mickey turned and continued on out the door, taking my hat from the chandelier. I followed. Come to lunch someday, he suggested as we groaned down in the elevator. Where? Anywhere? Ah, keep your hand off the lever, sniffed the elevator boy. I beg your pardon, said Mr. Mickey with dignity. I didn't know I was touching it. All right, I agree. I'll be glad to. I was standing beside his bed and he was sitting up between the seats, clay in his underwear, with a great portfolio in his hand. Beauty and the Beast, loneliness, all grocery horse broke in the bridge. Then I was lying half asleep in all the lower level on the Pennsylvania station, starring the morning tribute and wait for the clock train. So, done. And all right, right now I'm quote from the sentences from this chapter is Beauty and the Beast, loneliness, old grocery horse, and broken bridge. So, like we know, the girl in the story is rich, but yeah, even they are still beauty, but they are feel lonely, right? But and the man feel shame, I think, because they he pure. So so he said like that. I curiosity to see her. I had no desire to meet her, but I did. So even the man I know the status about him, but yeah, the man still curious, and the man uh no chance to meet her. But yeah, they make change. he made change. So that's why uh, I connected with the Disney movie Belle, right? Beauty and the Beast. So even the girl very rich and have the good level statues, have all grocery house and broken bridge and the beauty house also. But even they are beauty, they see feel lonely, right? So when they are meet up the man, he and the man connected and engaged and feel incredible. So I think I more understand. Maybe Gatsby is old slang, but it means like uh, George's uh, George's and rich of and with the people have all anything, but they are still feel lonely because yeah, another people scared to near with the so yeah, that's it about this. And it's happy to see. And even I'm not understand too much, but I really excited to read next one in the next video, of course. And it give me sweet things in my mind. And yeah, it's not just Disney fictive, but in real life have about it. And I don't know, I'm feel connected also because even I'm not rich, my family background is not high level also, but I think I'm feel the same with the Daisy because yeah, many of people scared to get closer with me. I don't know how. Even I'm not beauty, but I know I'm a cute person. So mm, yeah, but in the end, if I remember Belle, happy ending, right? So I don't know the story about couple relationship, the Gatsby, be behind the Gatsby, it's really be happy or not. But I don't know, I just like this ebook or novel, and I can't really wait to read the next one. So yeah, that's all for today, and see you.